Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Dharma Essentials. Today we're going to talk about EQ and tonal control. EQ is just what you might find in your car when you see a fader for the treble and the bass, but in music production, it's one of the cornerstones of mixing. The first thing that we're going to do is take a look at this bass. Now let's look at the EQ as we play the bass. We can see, just as you might imagine, most of the important frequencies are happening in the low end of the spectrum. It doesn't have all that much going up in the high end of the spectrum, but you will find with almost any instrument, it's not going to be exclusively in the low end or the mid or the high end. You're going to have a little bit of frequencies in every department. And that's important because in this case, the click of the bass is taking place up here. And as I turn on this bell curve, you can really hear the click come out. It's an important element of your bass, not just the low-end frequencies, but the high-end frequencies give a certain urgency and attackiness to your bass, a clickiness to your bass. So as we go from the left to the right on this x-axis of the EQ, these are your low frequencies, these are your high frequencies. You'll also notice if you use a program like Pro Q, these frequencies all correspond with the note, just like you'd find on a piano. So for instance, this would be an F, and we could increase this frequency, which when you read out the number sounds random, 349.23. In reality, it is a very musical frequency. It's a perfect F4 on a piano. So that's good to keep in mind as you're making these adjustments, that they do correspond with real tones that we're all familiar with. So here are some more EQ adjustments we can make, raising the low end. It's often a lot more musical to use a bell curve like this one with a low Q when you're making adjustments to the low end. For instance, if I did a really high Q, this would result in a resonance. But if I use a low Q that's wider, it has a much more natural sound because you're not just increasing one frequency, you're allowing a more broad hill-shape addition to the frequencies that just sounds more natural and less focused on one specific frequency causing resonance. Now, because we know we're gonna add in a lead noise, I've made this subtractive adjustment with the bell curve, reducing some of the mid frequencies that a lead might take up. It will have frequencies in that region. So here we have a bass that I'm pretty happy with. We've used this bell curve here to make a really extreme adjustment to the high end because the bass was missing that clickiness. And in some cases, that's okay. You see it says an additional 25 decibels, but in reality, the addition is not so extreme because we started with a very low value in the high frequencies. So with these adjustments, we're happy with the bass. The thing we can move on to here is this lead that we want to add. I would recommend, as you're mixing elements and using EQ, that you play elements together so you understand how the EQ is affecting the relationship between elements, in this case our lead and our bass. Here's an EQ that I've set up on our lead. The first thing that I've done is a low cut or a high pass on the lead so that it does not conflict with the bass frequencies from our bass. That's the first thing. The next thing I'm noticing is this resonance. A resonance is when a particular frequency is building up and can cause a whistling effect that can hurt your mix if you're not careful. So in this case, we've identified it at C7, and we've made a dip there. Here it is before, and here it is after. We've effectively killed that whistle. Another thing that we can do to enhance the important role that the lead is playing is to turn on a bell curve around 7.8 kilohertz that I have here. And that covers the brightness that you would want, but I would also be careful to avoid using a high shelf like this one, because although you're getting those high frequencies that you want, you're also introducing a lot of ultra high frequencies that you can't even hear and you don't even really want because they're not playing a role musically in the lead. So if I solo it, I can show you what those frequencies sound like. Very, very high. They are going to be noticed by your ear as they build up from element to element to element that you add that's going to your master all of those high frequencies can become very harsh, and I will caution you in allowing them to build up by using a shelf in the high end. A better option in a lot of cases would be to use something like this bell here. And in fact, I'm gonna turn on this high cut that's gonna get rid of those ultra high frequencies. Now, by getting rid of those high frequencies there, it might lose some of the excitement in the lead sound, but we can add that back in with something like a ride. And now our high frequencies are much more deliberate. We're deciding on a very particular rhythm. And instead of our ears popping up by the random times that that lead comes through with those super high frequencies, we've killed them from the lead, and now we're using a ride. And a ride has a very consistent, rhythmic way of giving you those high frequencies that, in most cases, is what you want. And before we added the EQ, the lead sounds like this. Has that whistle and is a bit muddy, you might say. And here it is with the EQ. All right, so that has been our overview of EQ and tonal control. I hope you guys have seen that by just using EQ and little else, you can get a much better mix, a much better sound out of your instruments. So see you in the next lesson.